Welcome to the Training Edge with Dave and Stu. This is our podcast on everything health, wellness, and fitness. My name is David Spear, along with my co-host Stu Burton. And we've been pushing out this podcast for the last few weeks, I guess, a couple of months maybe, talking with individuals in the areas of bodybuilding and strength training, as well as some nutrition. And today we have a guest, Ms. Tiffani Bachus, and she is a registered dietitian from Arizona. Thank you so much for joining us, Tiffani. Really happy to have you on the show. And so we'll hear from Tiffani in terms of some answers to very specific questions from listeners who wrote in, but also, we'll have a conversation about how is nutrition sort of portrayed in the media, and, what does it look like in terms of summer nutrition? I know every summer we get that magazine cover article that says, lose 10 pounds in 3 minutes. It's kind of, right? It's a sensational article. So we're going to try to maybe debunk some of those myths, but also answer, some of those questions and give you guys some really good information to walk away with. So Tiffani, thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm sorry we had a little technical difficulties at the beginning, but I'm really honored that you guys are having me on the show today.
Good. We're glad to have you. Glad to have you. I'm excited.
So one thing I wanted to just let our listeners know: a registered dietitian is someone who has it's a license, right? It's a state license in the area of nutrition, but from a biochemistry standpoint. Can you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit, just in terms of what you go through academically and in terms of, internships and things like that?
Yeah, it's a really tough major. I mean, I was actually surprised. I was always interested in nutrition and fitness. And when I learned what it took to become a registered dietitian, I almost had second thoughts. So when I was at University of Arizona, I was studying nutrition, and I was in all the classes with all the pre-med students. So I was basically a pre-med student, which was challenging because they're trying to get into pre-med, they're trying to get into medical school. So the courses and the way they approached it, I mean, they were all, gung-ho, all A's, and I was really struggling. I remember it was very challenging. Once you get the degree, then you have to do an internship or an AP4 program. And then that's more practical. You're in the clinical setting, you're in food service, you're in the community. So you have to do a certain amount of hours and rotations through all three of those. And then you're able to sit for the exam. So It was a lot of work, but it was well worth it.
That's great. And also, and the reality is too, when people go to see their physician, a physician might say, hey, it'd be great if you lost a little bit of weight, your blood pressure's a little high or whatever. But they don't have the nutritional background that an RD does, right? And it's interesting that is there a connection in a sense between the medical community and the RD community?
Sure. I mean, when you're in an acute care facility, so if you're working at the hospital, I mean, there's certain, there is a chance to really work with them as a team. So we're looking at people, but these are people that are obviously coming in sick.
Correct.
Whether or chronic, and depending on what their needs are. I used to work at the cardiac rehab facility over at Scottsdale Healthcare, and so I was doing a lot with heart disease, and then I worked in the diabetes center. So I've had the opportunity to work with people that are obviously have disease, that have illnesses, but my passion really lies with more preventing. So prevention. So I got out of the hospital setting, and I'm like, okay, here's the thing: we need to kind of work on these things before you get sick.
Yeah.
Stu and I talk a lot about that this is more of a treatment model of healthcare in this country, and it isn't a prevention model of healthcare, and we're trying to move in that direction. If you look at some insurance companies and you look at some major corporations, they're really trying to focus on prevention. I don't know how that message is really being received, because we're still not seeing, we're still dealing with basically 60% overweight and obese in this country. So it's going to take some time. I think that's great. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, it looks, I think, a lot like most people don't really understand, I think, really a lot about the nutrition, even though you might have access to people that are giving out really good information. I think the way how the medical institution is really working a lot with people, prevention, I really don't, I really don't see too much prevention, to be honest. And even even athletically, so when we have athletes that were training back in the 50s, the 60s, 70s, we have the athletes that are working today, and then with the supplementation and then the enhancement of pharmaceuticals that athletes use, we see something very different. So I think it's great having her here, which we could ask a lot of questions, because I even have a couple of questions I want to ask, and just get a little bit more information and put things together to make it a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get to some of the questions that some of our listeners wrote in on. The first one is, I'm a 50-year-old male. I've been exercising regularly since my 30s. I could lose a few pounds, and I find that when I change the way I eat for the worse, I quickly gain weight, much faster than when I was in my 30s and 40s. Are there certain ages at which a body's metabolism actually slows down?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And unfortunately, as we age, that is one of the downfalls, is that we are seeing a little bit of muscle atrophy when we hit about 30, 40 years old of age. And then even over into 50, we have sarcopenia, which is an age-related muscle atrophy. So unfortunately, that's the downfall of aging, but it can be stopped, it can be reversed. So I think when I just heard this question, and he said he eats poorly, or when he does not eat well, is when he notices the changes, and that's absolutely true. I mean, you have to be consistent with your eating, really consistent with your exercise, and once you kind of put that whole package together, you really could stop and reverse sort of muscle atrophy. So I think he pretty much nailed it. It's just now he's got to put that into practice.
Yeah. He already kind of like realizes it. I tell a lot of my clients, it's like a physics equation. If everything is not there, the answer is not going to be what it is you think it should be, or it's not going to come out correctly. You have to have all the components there in order for it to turn out correct. And he already realizes that when he doesn't eat properly, he notices the atrophy and probably other changes, probably sleep, other things that are going to affect him hormonally, because I think a lot of what happens is when you're not eating well, the right things on a cellular level can't be taking place within the body. So what starts to happen is then that you start to see the age. You start to see these things happening. If you eat better, and it's not that I'm even saying that you can really stop it, but you want to be doing the best that you can be doing for yourself. You want to be your own best friend. So if you're doing the right thing, making the right choices, doing the exercising, you can slow that process. And in a lot of cases, we see with a lot of the bodybuilders in their 50s and 60s now, 70s, Bill Grant that was on here, former Mr. World, 73 years old. Bill Grant looks amazing. Most 73-year-olds don't look like Bill Grant, so, a lot of it is being consistent and cultivating that, I think, when you're young. If you have the ability to go in and start doing the right things at a young age, the resiliency is that much better.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think habit has a lot to do with it. Developing that as a lifestyle, as opposed to just kind of a very short-term type of situation.
Right.
And, you mentioned Bill Grant, and there's been a lot of studies that show that octogenarians and nonagenarians, people in their 80s and 90s, can still change the cross-sectional area of muscle.
Absolutely.
Due to, weight training or strength training. And
yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask Tiffany, so in this man's instance, what are some of the things that you think at 50, I mean, we don't have a whole lot on him, but at 50 years of age, what are some of the things you think he could do, to help to maintain those gains, as far as eating?
As far as eating, yeah. I was going to say, for sure, exercise and muscle resistant work is going to be critical to increasing or maintaining that muscle mass. When you're in a calorie deficit or low in protein, your body is not allowing protein synthesis to happen. So if you are exercising or weight training, you're just not eating the sufficient amount of calories or protein that your body needs, then your body is not going to be able to repair and rebuild the way it should, because we all know those micro tears happen during the weight training process, but we needed to repair and rebuild so that we can increase our muscle mass and strength.
Right.
The calories are important for that.
Right.
But what your calories are made of are very important. So I don't want you just to eat a whole bunch of calories that are empty calories or non-nutrient.
Correct. Yeah.
So protein, you know, getting those macros and protein, carbs, and fat are critical, but where that protein source is coming from is important.
Right.
We'll talk about carbohydrates, where your carbs are coming from, and of course, healthy fats. So I would kind of start to kind of map out his meals and his diet plan, ensuring that he's getting proper nutrients for his diet, but also I would throw in some supplements if his body is deficient in anything. Could it be vitamin C? Could be magnesium.
Right.
So there's a lot that kind of goes into this. I never understand how there's so many nutritionists out there that are just throwing diet plans and nutrition plans without really investigating each person's personal, you know, journey and where they are in their life.
Yeah.
Right.
So with this question, I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask.
Right. Blood work, because with these things we can see. I mean, we can take a basic guess. We know most people. We know that are deficient in magnesium. It's huge, especially if you're living inland. You know, so you know, getting that, then over calcium and everything has calcium in it. The supplements are cheap, so they use it as a filler. You know, so we can kind of like guess, you know, to a certain extent, you know, certain things that are taking place, and make basic corrections, like add a good multivitamin, you know, drinking certain amounts of water on a daily basis. But absolutely, you know, being again more specific, but getting that general, you know, rounded, okay, I'm going to start with this, try and eat that, and feel that the food is being digested, not adding food on top of food that you still feel very stuffed and full, because that's not going to speed up the metabolism as well. So in the old days, a lot of the great bodybuilders, strength athletes, these guys were really, it was so much more instinctive, but it's so much more different today. You know, back then there was a lot less available. I think the very first protein out was Rio H. Blair's protein, right? So, and I had a chance to, you know, try some of it, but the way how they went about structuring things and putting things together, very, very different, because you had to be a lot more intuitive. You had to really be paying attention to your body, trying to understand how things are working. But today, with you know, with all the social media stuff, it is just bombarded. All over this, try that, the warrior diet, the keto, the paleo, you know, and I think people are just confused. I think people just don't know what to pick. You know, I think we have one about the Game Changers, you know, diet, where this gentleman wants to be a competitive bodybuilder, and he's confused. You know, they're saying eat only vegetables. This is what he believes they're saying. And if we can, I would love to go into that one and see what it is that you have to say on that. You know, so he was, where is this? Oh my God. He's talking about that he's a young guy. He wants to be a competitive bodybuilder. And he's confused about the documentary, The Game Changers. Should I be eating only vegetable-based proteins to build maximum muscle size and strength? And I really want to hear what you have to say about that, Tiff.
Okay.
What do you think about it? Did you see the Game Changers thing?
I never saw it. I know about it, but I never got to see it.
All right.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did. I did see it. Yeah, I looked at it. Yeah, I have my own opinions on it. You know, I got my opinions on it. You know, did you see that, Dave?
No.
You didn't see the Game Changers?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, man. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. My whole concept and what Iron and Silk is based off of is balance. Right. So I've been at this for like about 40 years, and I've trained with some of the best strength athletes and, you know, and bodybuilders really on the planet. These were some of the guys that I had the opportunity to work with. And back then, the philosophy was you're eating small meals to large meals. You're eating them frequently. You're getting a lot of protein in, and you're just training hard. Right. You know, it's very basic. But these guys had great physiques. No one was doing cardio. The only guy that was really kind of doing cardio that was a bodybuilder, powerlifter, boxer, European boxing champion was Franco Colombo, which was Arnold Schwarzenegger's, you know, training partner. He trained with Arnold a bit, but Franco nobody really could train with Franco because Franco was so damn strong. But he was one of the only guys that was jogging and jumping rope. The other athletes weren't doing this. These guys were training at fast pace inside the gym, very little rest in between, a lot of volume meaning sets. A lot of people think in terms of repetition. Volume meant sets back then. And a lot of the terminology has changed a lot with what guys are talking about today. But these guys were muscular, and they were quite lean. And they had, what they basically did was they would eat a very high protein diet for about 3 to 4 days, and then on third or fourth day they would load. So then they would eat anything they want. They would eat pizza, they'd eat ice cream, they'd do stuff like this, and then they'd go back and they would do this stuff again. What we have found that is, it's good, it works, and everything works to a certain extent. What we like to do is incorporate balance with our eating, right? Because when you're eating a lot of protein, if you're not getting enough, vegetable sources inside, it's very, very hard for it to pass through the system. We're really focused on elimination. Elimination is something that's very important, because if you're not eliminating, you can't add stuff right back in, and that's going to obstruct the absorption. So there are some really key components that we're really focusing on that I've used in my training over the years that really help a lot, right? The game changers was a lot about consuming vegetable-based proteins, not eating meat. No need for it is basically the kind of gist that that everyone that has spoken to me about is what they got with this. So people are like, Stu, I'm switching only vegetarian. What do you think of that? It's an interesting concept. I think that the results that they saw with people that were consuming large amounts of protein and ate vegetarian was a shift in balance more than a shift in the fact that the vegetarian type of diet is superior. You're seeing a diet that was maybe out of balance become more imbalanced with the infusion of the vegetable sources. This is what I got from it. I don't believe in extreme high amounts of protein every day. I don't believe in just eating vegetable-based proteins. I think you actually have to have that balance between them. And I never even ate large protein 7 days a week. I might do that Monday to Friday, Saturday to Sunday. I'd have a day where I really cut back. I might have a junk meal on Saturday, but then on Sunday, I might not eat almost anything, and then come back in on Monday and start my cycle all over again. So it's almost like a little bit of a fast with also a reduction in protein, so the body was be able to absorb that protein from that Monday to that Friday. So it's an interesting thing to take a look at. I think then we should actually look at it again. I would love to have Tiffani come back on and definitely have you view it too, Dave, because it's interesting to see how people, I think they think about one thing and then they just go at it. They're looking for that magic bullet.
Like tunnel vision, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, squat, then I'm only going to squat. No, it's more than that, because the body is so unique. The individual is so unique, so diverse. You have to have a lot more mobility. You can't think in terms of like a bullseye and jump in there and just eat veg and that's going to work. That kind of approach will never work. And I don't think that's what they were really trying to get across, but I don't think just eating a vegetarian diet would be very beneficial. Now, that's just my opinion. Tiffani, lay it down.
All right, Stu. Wow. Okay. First of all, you are my man. I mean, you are the balance. The idea of balancing out has always been kind of my motto. That has been, and I was a fitness competitor. I competed for about 13 years. So when you are a competitor, that's way different than real life, like every day, off season, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
A way of being, because it is extreme. I mean, you have to be on stage at your leanest, lowest body fat. I mean, there's so much to it. So if we're going to take the aspect of like competing, this kid is who wants to compete. Is that
he wants to compete? He's 6'2", 185 pounds, 24 years old.
Okay, so let's kind of talk about the competitor, and then we'll talk about kind of the overall, like what we should do year round.
Yeah.
But as a competitor, there's going to be extremes. I want to start with the fact that one thing you mentioned about balance, and one thing that you mentioned about what people did way back in the day in bodybuilding, was our diets and the food supply was so different.
Absolutely.
And we have to consider the fact that, like you said, the protein powders, you could buy like one protein powder. It wasn't like amounts. So, what we're seeing now is so different than what we saw 10, 20, 30 years ago. Okay, so let's just take that into consideration. I would say the number one thing that we need to focus on, and what I found and what I got from the whole story here, is that it's all about inflammation. So when we are eating a plant-based diet, which is full of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, we've got antioxidants, we know that is so healthy and nourishing for the body.
Right.
Also nourishes the gut. So we're talking about microbiome here. So we
Right.
can absorb our nutrients. Plant-based food in general is superior.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
Right.
With that said, I'm not going to take the camp of it's only going to be plant-based. You only have to be vegetarian. You can't have any meat. I want to now take the other approach and say that there is benefits to eating animal protein as well, but it needs to be grass-fed and finished. It needs to be organic. The quality of the meat that you're eating is so important because it's
Right.
hormones.
Right. Right.
If it's not a healthy meat that you're consuming, it can cause inflammation in the body. And once
Right.
you have inflammation in the body, your body does not respond well,
Right.
right?
Right.
Digestive
Well,
issues.
I think like excess inflammation, right? Because we do need some inflammation in the body,
Yes, that's
right? So people understand. And then the alkalinity that you're creating through the phytonutrients of the green vegetables is
Right.
good, but we don't also want to be too alkaline. And I think this is where people start a little bit of knowledge becomes very, very dangerous. But I'm sorry, but go ahead.
No, I mean, no, thank you for jumping in. That is exactly it. I mean, obviously our bodies need some inflammation. That's what heals the body.
Correct.
Right, finding that balance.
Right.
Too much inflammation, chronic inflammation is a problem.
Right.
And that does pose a threat when we're eating a lot of animal meat or protein.
Mhm.
It's not a healthy quality meat.
Correct.
But with that said, we have iron, we have selenium, we have B
Right.
vitamins, we have
Right.
all key nutrients that we can find.
Right. Right.
So, again, Stu, I'm kind of with you on this. I don't think there's one way, there's not a cookie cutter way of doing this. I would start with the fact that most people will benefit from a diet that's around 70 to 80% plant-based, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
There's the 20, 30% if you want to add animal protein. There's that room to have animal protein in it. But again, finding the balance, Stu,
Right.
exactly what you said, striking that balance is critical. And making sure that your body and your gut is healthy so that you can absorb those nutrients.
Right.
So, going back to this bodybuilder, there's going to be some extreme measures that take place when you're a competitor.
Right.
Just that's how, that's the part of the game.
Right. Yeah.
But if you can find a foundation and build it with quality nutrients and improve the gut, the GI integrity, then from there you can manipulate the macros where you need it. Absolutely, you do what you need to do to compete.
Right.
But plant-based food is superior and it should be a part of the diet. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good.
Great.
Dave,
Great.
I mean, I remember when you were competing. So, what were you doing basically back then?
Well, at the time, my trainer was supposedly a nutritionist. At the time, it was in the mid '80s in Albany, and he owned like an exercise store. He sold exercise equipment out of it, and then in the back was a gym where we used to work out. A lot of what I ate was sort of brown rice with, chicken breast, and like it was very, very bland. Like a lot of it was extremely bland food.
Right.
And when I competed, it was weird. He kind of put me on a 7-day diet that kind of, allowed me to rid myself of water over the course of 7 days. So there was carbo loading in the beginning, and then and then you waste it away. You kind of dieted down, and it was very difficult. That's the other thing I would say. It wasn't, wasn't my normal diet, so it was very difficult. It was very hard to adhere to it. And the other thing, and Tiffani makes a really good point, is that, yes, you guys are talking about balance. It's also preference. Like you may have somebody who doesn't like meat, or you may have somebody.
Right.
So you kind of have to find, what that individual is willing to eat.
Correct.
And I don't think there's any reason to necessarily deprive yourself of anything or to add something into your diet that you hate.
Right.
You hate it, so you're not going to eat it.
Absolutely. I think it's important, definitely, taking a look at that, like you said. I mean, 100% on, we have vegetarians that come to my training center all the time. We always tell people, we don't take a vegetarian and try and force them to eat meat. We just show vegetarians how to eat better and be better vegetarians. Because if you're trying to force somebody into thinking a certain way, that's never going to work.
Right.
You know, that's trying to take too much control over someone. Someone has to want that change in order for that change to be successful.
And,
So it's understanding who it is you're dealing with, what their goals are, you know, and then trying to help them to reach those goals with the way they are trying to approach it, you know. But yeah, 100% on, man. Yeah.
And so I want to get to another question, but one thing that strikes me is that a lot of the, and you call it, you know, we call these things diets, right? Once you call it a diet, you categorize it, and you make it into an entity that it really isn't, right? It's about eating, like you said, for balance or lifestyle or whatever. But a lot of these ways of eating are methods of deprivation in one way or another. Would you agree, Tiffani? Do you think that is that a right way to sort of define it?
I mean, I think there's this stigma of like a diet out there, and the diet is like, oh, gotta lose weight, or there's like a label to it. I agree. I mean, I probably sometimes use the word diet, but I do believe that overall it's a way of eating. And as I mentioned earlier, and Stu has talked about this too, is striking a balance. But at certain times when what your goals are could be different. So when your goal is to be a competitor and you got to get on stage, that's going to take a tweaking in your way of eating.
Correct.
That is a specific diet plan out there. But I would say for like the overall health and wellness of somebody, it really isn't a diet. It's really about eating a balanced way of eating. And I know we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, David, about summer eating, you know, and what we eat in summer versus what we eat in winter and what we eat in spring. And listening to the circadian rhythms of the harvest, you know, and again, adapting to that for overall health and energy and wellness, right? So there's so much that plays into it. But again, going back to the word diet, it's just one of those words, you know, and I think there's able to it.
I mean, real funny. I want to just jump on that real quick too, before we move on to that next question. But, you know, it's always been, you know, that same thing too. I would say there's balance within the imbalance. So where someone might look and say in the wintertime, my consumption of dairy goes up. Now, some people might freak out. They're like, oh my God, you consume dairy? Oh, the pus and the dairy and this and that. But my body works really well with it works very good in dairy. But when it starts to get warm, I tend to not want it. I've also gone maybe 10 years of not having dairy because I was following a stricter training type of protocol. And I mean all year round, no dairy. So, you know, I've done food combining for years. I've done, you know, different combinations just to see how they work, how they fail, and then how to get them to work again. Because everything I've ever done, so people ask me, has worked. And every single thing has also failed. The idea is then looking at it and seeing, hey, how do I have to go in now and tweak this thing in order to make this thing continue to work? You know, and I think that's something also really important. There's a method to the madness, and there's continuity to where there is no no structure. No structure. So I love nutrition. That's really like, you know, it's one of the big things for me. I love nutrition. It's what makes or breaks my business, you know, because if you're not getting the right macronutrients, you're not getting the right calories, the performance that I'm looking for is not going to materialize, which means, you know, things aren't going to work out properly. So it's 85%, people, 85% of how your body is going to work. 85.
So you ready to get to the next question? Let's fire off the next question. So this is a question from, let's see, there's no name here, but it says, I just started doing basic stuff with dumbbells at home, bicep curls, tricep extensions, chest presses. And I run and jog for about an hour, both morning and at night. I'm attempting to do a solid month of liquid meals only because I'm trying to cut weight fast and really want to stick to it. I'm concerned of how lightheaded I am when exercising and just lounging around. Is this because I'm new to working out, or am I doing something wrong?
Tiffani, you could jump all over that.
Yeah, no. You know, I commend the person for trying to bump up their activity level. I mean, it sounds great. They're trying to do some weight resistance, try to do some cardio. A little excessive to maybe do morning and night. I don't know what their rest recovery days look like, or if they're doing any at all. And then let's talk about the headaches. I mean, there's a symptom right there. So a liquid diet, not knowing what it's consisting of, I'm assuming it's going to be, you know, it's broken down, it's assimilated, so it's fast digesting. Not sure how much protein, carbs, or fat, or even calories this person is receiving. But I would most likely, knowing that there's headaches involved, probably not enough calories, probably not enough
right.
or glucose, you know, that the body's receiving, because your brain needs glucose to function.
Yep.
If your body's not getting glucose, it has to break down, and the liver has to release some fat and break that down, or tear the muscle, right? So, you know, the first thing I would say, number one, is obviously let's try to bring in some solid food into the diet. If you're looking for a quick weight loss, which unfortunately is what everyone seems to like want to run to, right? It's what's fast, what's quick.
Right.
What's the problem with the fast, quick way of eating?
Right.
You know,
You're a society of instant gratification.
right.
That's it. Stu and I talk about it all the time.
It can't work.
Regardless of what you're doing, if you want to change your body, whether it be through nutrition or training, it's going to take time. It's going to take physical effort. That's it.
Right.
Consistency and patience. The tortoise beat the hare. You know. You know.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
The person's going to lose weight. We know the person, if you're on a calorie deficit diet, you're all that energy, you're going to lose weight. What is going to happen when you put food back in the diet?
Correct.
So that's the other thing, right? With something like that, this person goes off of this. They say, I'm trying to cut weight fast and really want to stick to it.
Right.
What am I sticking to? Am I sticking to the month of liquid diet? And then what happens after that month?
Right.
What happens? And your body is going to be craving nutrients. It's not good.
You're going to be ravenous, or you know, I mean, I've seen two things happen with this. I've seen people that have, back when Metrics supplement was out, there were some pro bodybuilders, right? Quite a few of my friends, and a lot of guys had switched over to more of a liquid based diet. It was actually really popular, and we had quite a few guys that were doing it. And they would have like anywhere from 3 to more than 3 shakes daily.
Wow.
And while some guys, weren't big eaters, they kind of did well on it. It's not sustainable. It's not really sustainable.
Right.
Those headaches are an indication. If you get a headache here and there, okay. But if you're having chronic headaches, that means you're not doing the right thing. Anything that is negative, if I'm training and I'm feeling joint pain, then there's something wrong. There's something wrong. When you start to get signals that your training, your nutritional regimen should not be yielding these kind of results. These are not the things that you want. And that's a red flag. That means, hey, change something. I can incorporate something into that menu that will negate that headache and allow me to continue to do what it is that I'm doing. But if you're doing something and you keep getting these chronic, that's a sign that you're not paying attention and reading the signs, reading your body. These are some of the most important things with training. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm telling somebody to do something, a person's like, hey, you know what? My knee just keeps hurting. I'm having to, you know, which never has happened, but that means that there's something wrong with the protocol. And you have to go back and you have to reassess it. And that's the beauty of nutrition. Because it empowers you, it educates you. It gives you the opportunity to go back, take a look at what it is that I'm doing, reevaluate it, and then move forward instead of just following things blindly. I hate that. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little excited.
Not here. You're right.
I'm sorry. That's nuts. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But like, you know, what Tiffani was talking about, it's true. You know, you want to lose weight, or it's summertime, right? It's you know, now we're almost into July, but
right.
Come May, everybody's like, oh my God, I got to lose this, I got to lose that, you know, and
right.
You do it quickly, and then, you know, and then you sort of, it's detrimental over time.
And I think, and what Dave and I have spoken about, Tiff, and I'm sure you experienced it as well, is how she's jumping in with the training. You know,
Right.
if your progression, I remember I was, working with this great coach. First time I ever hired a coach for the Central American Caribbean Championships. And, he was talking about cardio, and he was like, okay, Stewie, we're going to do, 20 minutes of cardio. I think he gave me 20, and every 3 days or every 5 days, we went up 5 minutes. So we had a very short period of time to prep for that competition. And so what happened was that he's trying to get my body to adjust to the extra cardio. And at the same time, the goal is really, and I liked working with him, is because I'm not interested in how much I need to do. To be very honest, I'm interested in the least amount of work that I need to do in order to get what it is that I want. If I don't have to do an hour cardio and I'm getting in shape in 20 minutes, why am I going to do an hour? That's a lot to bite off. An hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, that's a chunk of cardio. And that alone could be causing that headache because it's biting into the caloric, levels that she's taking in, right? So she's expending maybe a little bit more than what she has. Back off. Right. She probably will get better results if she dropped that second cardio session, cut that hour in the beginning to about 40 minutes, and then see how the body responds. And then slowly you start to incorporate things. That sounds like, again, we don't have the whole program out in front of us, but that sounds like a lot. I never start my prep like that. My cardio starts with 4 minutes, literally. And people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, yeah, 4 minutes. And they're like, oh, you gotta be joking. I'm like, no, 4 minutes, because you want to give your body time to get acclimated to the work. Yeah. And then when you're adding restricted calories or you're changing things around, you don't realize how the body's going to respond. So you want to view these things. And this is, again, going back to taking your time, having patience and not rushing. The three things she's talking about is she wants quick results. She's with that's the wrong approach. That means you haven't been doing anything to lead you to this point.
Correct. Right.
So
there are no quick results.
Yeah. You're trying to play catch up.
Tiffany, so Stu and I always joke about 6-minute abs. You know how it can get down to 30. So it's kind of like in that vein, that question.
Yeah.
So are you guys coffee drinkers?
Yeah.
Do you drink coffee?
I haven't had a cup of coffee in maybe about 6 months.
Wow. And Tiffany?
Yeah, no, I stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I switch back and forth between coffee and tea.
Tea, yeah. Okay. I'm kind of that way too. I've been doing a little bit more iced coffee in the summertime, but so here's a question. I'm a huge coffee drinker and I love to have iced coffee in the summer. I work long hours and feel the caffeine keeps me awake, but recently I found I get jittery after about 2 cups worth in one sitting. Can you give me some advice on how caffeine can be consumed safely, or should I stop it altogether?
Yeah, I mean, there are some people that are sensitive to coffee. I mean, everyone's metabolism is a little different.
Right.
I would say if you're getting jittery after 2 cups, was it 2 cups?
Yeah, two.
Drop it down to about 50 milligrams of caffeine. That's about 4 ounces. Start with that. See how the body processes it. If you really feel like you want that cup of coffee. I mean, it's one of those things where what's safe, everyone's body's a little different, but they say right around 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine, a day is a safe amount. And if you have pre-existing heart conditions, something to take into consideration, how your body responds to the caffeine. Do you not sleep well after you drink caffeine? So start small, if you really want some.
Right.
Start 50 milligrams and then kind of work your way up and see how that feels.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's good advice. And also this could be, could just be a person who developed a sensitivity to caffeine.
Right.
Getting jittery. Could also be, and I wonder what you think about this. Could it also be sort of environmental? Could it be stress related? And then maybe does the caffeine exacerbate that kind of
anxiety or whatever's going on?
That's interesting. I've never seen someone that was a coffee drinker get jittery on going with 2 cups, to be honest. I've seen people that need more. Their body becomes desensitized to the caffeine and tend to need a little bit more. I know some pro athletes, that actually, that if they take caffeine, it puts them to sleep. It actually makes them, because the central nervous system is so suppressed, you're looking at adrenal fatigue and failure, it knocks them out. You know, I myself, I never drank coffee until, and I'm from Central America, and I never drank coffee until I was in my mid 40s, you know, never drank coffee. But what I would suggest is that, you know, again, trying to find out, because they're asking, are they taking the coffee for an effect? You know, are they taking it because of taste, or are they taking it for effect? I would only use caffeine for a burst. I'm using it primarily just to, you know, give me a kick. I don't like the way coffee tastes per se. You know, I'm more of a cacao guy. You know, that's what we really consume. And I've very young, at a very young age, I actually went back to more of the things that I ate as a kid that actually helped me to get in shape, instead of eating what would be considered your typical bodybuilding, white potatoes, chicken. That stuff never worked for me. When I would use yuca instead of the white potato, my body responds better. If I use white potato, it doesn't respond. I mean, I can eat it and I like it.
Right.
But to get in shape, I'm going to choose yuca over white potato every day.
So it's interesting. Yeah, so also, but caffeine also does have some positive effect on endurance.
It does.
So studies that came out in the 80s and 90s have shown that endurance, especially runners and cyclists, would use caffeine, right? Because it would allow the body to burn fat more efficiently.
Not only that,
really have to like but the amount of caffeine you have to be taking in is a decent amount of milligrams of caffeine. It's not like you have 1 cup of coffee and you go run 30 miles. You know, you have to be an endurance athlete, and so
and the dose, it was a ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin stack. It's called an ECA stack. And the ECA stack, what you're doing is, when you have the caffeine and the aspirin helps to prolong the effects of the caffeine. So what happens is, your caffeine, you get a kick and then it dies off, but the aspirin is going to allow the caffeine to intensify, and it's going to make it work a little bit longer. When you would have ephedrine, I'm not going to give out the exact dosages, and you add real ephedrine to it, what would happen is, the studies behind that, we know that you get very good fat burning effects from it. You know, but that's true.
But like Tiffani said, though, the ephedrine could really have a detrimental
with the heart
for people with pre-existing conditions.
Absolutely, and that's why they took it off the market, because some people had heart attacks. So ephedrine was pulled off the market for about a few years, and then when they reintroduced it, more mahuang. Right. You didn't have, and it's very interesting. It's like white willow bark, which is aspirin, right? So if you were to take mahuang, white willow bark, and you take, you know, something else and you add it to it to try and create that effect, you don't get the same results, which is very, very interesting, because I've played with drinking black coffee and with using caffeine tab, and 2 different response in my body. You know, 2 totally different response. This is what I love nutrition, because if you're looking at things, you have to really educate yourself on them. How does coffee work with my system, as opposed to taking, let's say, a Vibrant tablet, right? It's 2 totally different delivery systems. Yes, I'm taking it through the mouth, but one is liquid based with heat, maybe coming from like a hot cup of coffee, or maybe it's cold. But the way it's going to work with the body, you have to pay attention to that. See, as a bodybuilder, that's what we tend to do. We tend to really pay attention. I mean, that's the way how I was, you know, because I was a hard gainer. So everything was like, I had to really pay attention to my eating, really watch my training and supplementation, and then simplify it, learn the basics. What does a protein shake do for me? What did the multivitamin do? B vitamin C. And once you start to learn the basics, you start to grade up. You start to move into ergogenic aids, gamma orzinol. You're looking at these type of things, and then you start to realize how they work. And it's a process.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We have another question here from a 19-year-old who would like to know how to eat properly. I was really chubby as a kid, had bad eating habits, and lost a lot of weight during puberty, I guess. Never kicked my sugar addiction, though. Right now, I'm about 5 foot tall, 126 pounds, and summer is here, and I only want to eat junk food. Help, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've just picked up 3 new clients that are right around that age, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. You know, really, I look at overall health and wellness, and again, Stu, we're kind of on the same track here with balance. I would go with 4 pillars. You know, I would help, and when I work with people one-on-one, I work on obviously what their goals are, what do they want to achieve, what their diet, you know, what their diet actually looks like at that time, like a snapshot
Right.
of what they're currently doing, what tweaks we can make that will work for them. But the 4 pillars are really nutrition, movement, sleep, which is, of course, we never talk enough about sleep, and stress.
Right.
What kind of stresses does this 19-year-old have, and can it impede in the health and the wellness? Are we craving sugar because we're missing nutrients? You know, are we lacking in quality nutrients, nourishing the body properly? Or are we not sleeping enough? Because we know sleep has a connection with also sugar cravings.
Right.
What's hormones look like? So, you know, I would work with her, and I would say the first thing that we would do is on the diet, the nutrition component, I would make sure that she's getting an adequate amount of nourishing nutrients in her diet. So again, going back to what we talked about earlier, which is more of a plant-based, you know, diet that's primarily 70 to 80% plant-based. Again, if preference, animal protein comes into play there, so that we're making sure that we're getting healthy fats, avocado, coconut oil, you know, extra virgin olive oil, making sure that she's getting flax seeds, you know, any sort of fiber through her fats or healthy fats. Then we go into our vegetables or fruits, lean protein sources. And then we can talk about the starchy carbohydrates and grains. So if we get an adequate amount and a well-balanced diet, that alone may change her curbing for sweets.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
great. Yeah, that's
I real quick, I want to add something to that too, what you're saying. A lot of times with people's cravings, what kills a craving is a fed body. And when I say a fed body, it has nothing to do with calories. It has to do with nutrients. Because a lot of times as a bodybuilder, we are restricting calories extremely, right? And through extreme restrictions, I found that if we saturated the system with high amounts of nutrients, what happens is that it kills your cravings. The cravings I've come to realize are basically, it's kind of like your fat cells holding your body hostage. And what happens is that as it starts to reduce, as they're shrinking, they want to stay. So the craving comes out. The body's trying to say, hey, give me that sugar, give me that cake, give me that, give me that drink.
right.
If you can make the best decision, like I said earlier, be your own best friend, grab something that's nutritious, high, maybe even more than what you might need, and pump it in. Get 5 grams of glutamine, maybe some amino acids in there. Get a green Vibrance, a green drink, put it in a celery drink, put a little veg, and drink that down. I guarantee you that craving will go away. But it's also it's definitely the mindset.
I was just
Because an athlete is going to more likely do that, but your average person, it's definitely more difficult for them.
Yeah, yeah. It's an addiction in any and it has a very tenacious psychological component that makes it very, very difficult to kick that kind of habit, especially if you're a carbohydrate addict. You know, you're constantly eating carbs.
Yeah, it's hard. Tiffani, the 19-year-olds that you work with, those teenagers, you know, also to their lifestyle, they're probably running around quite a bit, right? You know, going out, meeting people. How do you help people with wanting to get a drink? This is what they always ask me, Stewie, can I have the vodka, the tequila, you know, the margaritas, you know? I'm like, oh my God, how do you deal with that? Because at that age, they're partying.
Right. You know, I think what David mentioned is like, how badly do you want it? What's your goals?
Right.
And I'll turn to a 19-year-old, I'll say, okay, you're coming to me, you're spending money. What do you want to see happen?
Right.
Back on them, you know, because really in the end, it's going to be what they do. It's their choice.
Right.
I'm here to educate them. I'm here to kind of give them the tools and the skills they need. But it's going to be about what they want.
And
So, you know, I think, you know, when I work with them, and again, everyone's a little different. So I have one that is a drinker. I have one that doesn't like to drink, but she likes to eat carbs, and so she's eating a lot of pizza, whatnot, you know, so each one's a little different.
Pepperoni pizza, sausage.
Exactly. but I'm always going to go back and I'm going to educate them.
Right.
Educate and teach them is that striking a healthy balance. So if you can nourish the body, as Stu, you were saying that you just nailed it. You're filling your body up with good nourishing nutrients. That alone will help curb a lot of those cravings. But sleep, I'm working with these kids on sleep, enough sleep. They're on their phones all day,
Yeah.
It's, and again, habitual. Like, are they eating in front of the computer, in front of the TV when they're playing games? Are they just constantly associating phonics, or are they being mindful when they eat? Are they thinking about when they sit? So there's a couple things that I do when I work with them. One is developing a foundation, a good, healthy, nutritious foundation, teaching them that you don't have to be perfect. Because you know what? Who's perfect?
Thank you. Thank you.
So if you want to have a drink, you want to have some pizza, I get it.
Thank you.
Of course, it's part of it.
Right.
But also build a foundation, making sure that you are getting quality nutrients when you're not eating the pizza or the drinks.
Right.
And then I work on their habits. When you sit down and eat, you're going to sit down and look at your food, enjoy your food, taste your food. Don't do it while you're talking, you're on the phone.
Yes.
So,
chew 100 times, the old saying. Do you see all these old guys would tell me this stuff, Chris Dickerson, Mr. Olympia, he trained at my gym. I trained at Sheridan Square, and he would be like, Stewie, you got to chew your food, chew it. And I was a small kid, small eater, and he's telling it to me, but it was always that thing, chew your food well. But real quick, I wanted to add on something too. If I would have a slice of pizza, you know what I would always do? If I ever ate junk, I would actually, no joking, and I'm not saying anybody go out here and do this, but I would double, or quadruple, no joking, my multis. Like I would go home and I would take, like, if I had like 6 or 7 slices of pizza or 3 slices of pizza, I would go home and I would just like if I'm taking like 2 B vitamins, I would take 4. I take like 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C. And let me tell you, it kept my system. Yeah. It kept my system working really well. My body always tend to, and I learned that one from Leon Brown. Leon would always tell me, Stewie, and he would say, eat everything in the off season, eat. And then he would say, when it comes time to contest, you do what you have to do. He's like, but if you don't eat the junk, when it comes time to trying to getting in shape, the body can't recognize the switch, the change. Right. So you're eating the same things at contest time. You're just eating larger quantities in the off season. When it comes time to cut, there really is not a lot going to happen to the body. When you step out of that area and you have, let's say, lamb, pork, a lot of people are afraid to consume other types of meat, other types of vegetable sources, fruits, these type of things, because when you're trying to reduce sugar levels within the blood, reducing glycogen in order to get hard, you have to have some kind of deficit. There needs to be some change. There needs to be something that's a little different. If it's all the same, the body it's all the same. I think it's harder for a lot of guys to get in shape. I think that's why too, we don't see the physiques that we saw, the difference in the look of the physiques like we did back in the 80s, the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, and going back.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make. And one of the things I wanted to mention too, having to do with this 19-year-old who asked the question is, when I was getting my degree, I took courses in sleep physiology. It was literally the most boring information I ever heard. Meanwhile, I had no idea that sleep physiology would be one of the most important areas of really of health.
Absolutely.
Overall. We're learning about cycles and REM and circadian rhythms and alpha waves. I'm like, who cares about this? Is sleep, but you learn.
Yeah.
You get older.
Yeah.
That it's so important. It needs to be such a significant part of your life. You need to
absolutely
pay attention to it.
How you handle stress, your state of mind.
Absolutely.
Because that's also going to it's going to allow you to actually digest that food a little bit better.
Right.
If you're rushing and you're just gobbling your food down and you're running out, my nephew is a star center for Brunswick, and I would see him eat, and I'm just like, what happened to the food? And I'm like, Joe, slow down. You don't got to eat that fast. I'm like, take your time. I think those things are important. And rest is just, you cannot make up rest.
Right.
You can't make it up. And I'm going to give you another old saying in bodybuilding. They say, never walk when you can sit, never sit when you can lay down. And this is, it's all about resting, trying to rest. Athletes that do well have sponsors. Why? Because you can focus on what it is you need to do, train, and then rest. So people that are working jobs and are trying to incorporate training, don't try and emulate, I think, what it is that you see in terms of nutrition and training. Take it and make sure that it fits with what it is you're doing on an everyday basis, because the best program is not going to work if your lifestyle doesn't accept it. It has to be incorporated in a way that the body will and the mind can accept it. And sleep, you can't you can't skimp on sleep. You need your rest.
So I have go ahead, Tiff.
Well, I was going to say, besides sleep, because let me tell you, these teenagers can sleep. I mean, they sleep, but they sleep during the day. They're not getting they're not getting night sleep, the quality sleep. So that also is important to mention.
Absolutely.
I have a teenager. I can attest to that. So we have a question that's a little bit more relevant to today, having to do with COVID-19. My uncle was in an induced coma for months because he had COVID-19, but he has miraculously recovered despite the doctors telling us to prepare for the worst. He's 53, has diabetes, high blood pressure, and I'm sure health issues due to him being deathly ill. He lives an incredibly inactive lifestyle and eats pretty okay, I suppose. Is there anything we can do to make sure he gets strong and healthy again?
I mean, that goes back to the 4 pillars, that I have always talked about: sleep and movement, and proper exercise and as far as the movement, and then eating, healthy anti-inflammatory diet. I think would be critical. Maybe need some supplementations, but again, without knowing, the blood work and where he's at, it would be hard to kind of push anything like that. But I would mention that, again, going back to everything that we talked about, really quality of nutrients and nourishing the body. And I would say gut health. I mean, I don't know, that's your first line of defense, is your gut. If you're not absorbing your nutrients or you have impaired gut integrity, like glutamine is such a phenomenal thing to add, a supplement to add, and everyone can really benefit from glutamine, but it's for GI integrity. And then I would say vitamin C is critical. We know zinc is is very important for the body, for immunity. So I think boosting the immune system and getting him to move, get him outside, fresh air, vitamin D,
for sure.
Walking, and it doesn't have to be
psyche and for the physiology, right? I mean, right, for their head and for their body, getting outside is so important.
I think I'm real quick too on the with the glutamine, the branched chain aminos are now maybe for the last 2 or 3 years really come across also too as being very good for building up the gut. So the glutamine, branched chain amino acids, very, very effective at that. With the pancreas being an issue, we're talking about and diabetes, sugar, right? So, if the person does move a little bit, again, don't move to the point where, and again, we don't have the blood work and everything in front of us, but you're not trying to knock your body out the box. Right. You are trying to move around a little bit. You're trying to stay hydrated, because even with the best of diet, if there's not sufficient water, the conversion of these supplements and the way how they're going to permeate the cells, it's not going to take place. So, you want to get good water in the system. You want to try and get the rest, like Tiffany's talking about. She's talking about the exercise, all of those little things that you can do. Get up, go for a little walk. If you get up, go for a little walk in the sun. If you notice that you're getting tired and you've only walked half a block is the workout. Come back, come, and then come back. Getting good foods in.
I mean, and also just speaking about COVID-19, it would seem, it would make sense that individuals with better, gut biomes and better immune systems or stronger immune systems would do better with this virus. However, I don't know if that's the case. Is there any data that shows, individuals who have, let's say, you know, stronger immune systems, or they're able to boost their immune system in some way, whether through supplementation or nutrition, do they do better? Because you're hearing like people who are 40 and 35 who are dying from this, who are fit.
Yeah.
What is it that they have that the other 35-year-old doesn't have that's causing them to, you know, to be susceptible to this virus? Is there any data on that?
That's a great question. I can only say that, and I'm looking at it as an approach that if your body is strong and healthy, and you're not trying to fight off any inflammation, then when you're invaded by this virus, your body, I would assume, be able to handle it better, be able to fight it off better when your immune system is stronger. But I've heard data that you can develop this cytokine, you know, storm, which is kind of an overproduction of inflammation. So, you know, Stu, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, which is inflammation is important, right? We need inflammation because we want to heal the body, but too much, your body too much inflammation or it's not working well, is a problem as well.
Right.
So, you know, it's one of those things where I told my kids, I'm like, I need you to cut back on the sugar, alcohol, eat healthy, get plenty of sleep, so that if your body or if you've been in contact with the virus, I'm hoping that enough will kind of help, you know, allow it not to invade or cause problems. So I'm always kind of looking at that factor. I'm not going to over supplement. I heard that could be a problem. But making sure they are getting vitamin C and zinc are probably the two ones that I've been
Yeah.
Got
zinc
it.
is big.
Okay.
A lot of my friends that are in the medical field, we've been discussing a lot of this, and the zinc is one of the things that we blasted out, you know, very early on. You know, zinc monomethanine. It's a, you know, very highly absorbable form of zinc, and you know, vitamin C, and a lot of people have been getting very good results with it. You know, intravenous. And there are obviously the different forms of vitamin C, liposomal vitamin C, and then you can get ester C as well. But you know, again, not going crazy, because I think when people hear about things like ashwagandha and maca root because of the oxygenation of the blood flow and all of this type of stuff, and yes, they're good, and yes, I use them, and I use them with my clients. But understanding that when you start to stack things, the term that we use in bodybuilding, or you compound supplements on top of supplements, it doesn't mean it's going to work well. It can actually make it work, everything work horribly.
Right. There's a hard
you know, so it's about understanding, you know, again, you know, how you want to incorporate these things in, you know, and not just thinking, oh, wow, I have 7 of the most potent things that everybody's saying is awesome, and putting all of them in at all large amounts. That can cause a problem. That can cause a problem.
Yeah.
And going back, a little bit of knowledge, like I said, dangerous thing. Because then people think, oh, 100 milligrams? Well, then I'm going to take 20,000 milligrams.
I know exactly what I'm doing. Yeah.
And that's right. And that's not what you want. Add things, see how your body feels. Another day, a couple of days, incorporate something else. You're going to get a much better picture. You'll get a better understanding of what's happening with your body.
I agree. So listen, so we're kind of wrapping up. We just have a couple more minutes. I have one other question, and then Tiffani, you know, you're welcome back anytime. This was a great conversation, but this is a question about something very specific, lactose intolerance. And I know that there's a lot of information out there about like irritable bowel syndrome and people who just have a lot of problems with their GI. So this is a 38-year-old male who's lactose intolerant. Diagnosis was made after he had several bouts of bloating and diarrhea in his 30s. Nothing like this ever happened to me. I used to love to eat, especially dairy like milk and ice cream, but now I can't even think about it. I also love dessert. I don't want to deprive myself of these things. Is there anything that you can recommend I can do so I don't have to give this up?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, lactose, which is the sugar found in dairy products, is you need lactase to digest it, and that's found in the small intestine. And those little villas, you know, that help kind of absorb the food, over time, damage can happen, and those villas kind of break off. And that lactose, you know, the lactase that comes to digest the lactose, helps absorb it, is now not doing its job efficiently. So what happens is those larger particles will get absorbed into the large intestine, and then also you get the bloating, you get the gas, you get sensitivities. And not just this happens with lactose, but it also happens with gluten. You'll see a lot of people who have gluten intolerances. They don't have celiac disease. But again, gluten is a hard protein to digest. It's found in wheat, barley.
Right.
And so what happens is, again, when these villas are not working effectively and they're broken down, those larger particles get absorbed. So there's a couple things you can do. Number one, I always go back to just the gut microbiome. I always go back into the gut integrity and improving the health of your gut. Glutamine, again, is probably my go-to for that. Probiotics, something to take as well. But when it comes specifically to lactose and needing to digest lactose and that enzyme lactase, you can take a supplement. You can take the enzyme to help. You can choose foods that are less lactose, maybe like harder cheeses like Parmesan, cheddar.
Right.
That's something that, what the person wants. Again, it goes back to, do you want dairy or milk? Maybe you just do a dairy-free type of milk. Almond, coconut, hemp seed. So there are some other options that you can go dairy-free.
Right.
But if you really want that dairy, I would work on gut health and then possibly added, an enzyme to it. So add
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Really good suggestions. They also they have milk that's lactose, right? They have special lactate.
Lactate, yeah.
Yeah. So
it has the lactase in it, so it's pre-digested.
Right. Is there ice cream like that? Is there yogurt like that? I don't know. I know there's milk like that. But there are products out there for people who may be suffering from lactose intolerance. So listen, this was a wonderful conversation. We really covered a lot of information, answered a lot of questions. And we kind of have to wrap up, but Tiffani, thanks so much for really some great information, really great takeaways. And
thank you, Tiff.
Tiffani Bachus has been our guest. She's a registered dietitian. Her information is in the show notes, as well as any kind of social media connection to her. Feel free to reach out. And for David Spear in Arizona and Stu Burton in New York City, this has been The Training Edge with Dave and Stu. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tiffani. Everybody take care. David, thank you.
Take care, guys. Thank you.